I love Reddit. Easily the most impressive collection of communal lore and wisdom anywhere online. I spend way too much time there, but if you never get past the front page, you could walk away with the impression that every Redditor is this left-leaning atheist who hates their parents and children and religion almost as much as they love fedoras and really bad grooming. It's an unfortunate archetype and probably untrue in the aggregate, but they are loud and they are influential, often poorly informed, or as they might say, confidently incorrect. But these are people. Behind the goofy handles, these are real people that I turn to regularly for my entertainment or for product recommendations or for any kind of DIY instruction. The community has proven invaluable. So I guess in my own way, I want to pay that forward with information that will help your average Redditor formulate or maybe consolidate their ideas around religion. Now, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm Muslim. This is Ramadan. Feels like a good time to have this type of conversation. And we're going to cover a lot of ground. The existence of God, the nature of truth, religion and control, the nature of life, death, the afterlife, immortality, the problems of evil in the world. Lots of stuff, but in bite-sized chunks. But before we get into any of that, it's been a while. Hope you're doing well. We actually had a doozy of a storm. We're currently snowed in, hoping for some sunshine and rain to help clear all of that out, inshallah. So yeah, we're just going to start small, and I think a great place to start is just with the idea of belief, the construct, the notion of belief itself, because I think this is where I might differ, let's say, with an atheist, specifically in the weight that I give belief, as opposed to, let's say, the weight the atheist might give to something like reason. Now, balancing these things, by the way, was not an historical problem. All of the sort of intellectual heavyweights from whom we derive our current understanding of logic and science, people like Aristotle or Newton or Galileo, these were all believers, understood in some cases to be heretical, for sure, but they all had an abiding sense of the divine. They didn't see their logical or scientific inquiry as anything other than ultimately pointing to something greater than themselves. And this brings me to my first assertion, namely that atheism is effectively reactionary, that it isn't so much about devaluing belief, but that inquiry has historically run afoul of specifically Christian orthodoxy. And so to the extent that the church has censored inquiry, communities have responded with an equal and opposite reaction where they simply denied the plausibility of any kind of God, let alone religion altogether. That's just physics. But let's back up, because belief is essential, and even the atheist understands this. Maybe not necessarily belief in God, but belief as a fundamental part of the human experience, absolutely, it's undeniable. Some examples. You make plans with friends. You don't know who's going to show up. Somebody might get sick. You don't know if the weather is going to cooperate. You don't know what traffic is going to be like. It's ultimately an exercise in faith to have any kind of a social life. Or maybe more pointedly, let's think about the addict, somebody who has struggled with an addiction their whole life. Rationally speaking, we understand that previous behaviors, correlations, highly predictive of future results. What hope does the addict have for sobriety except for a belief, a vision, some act of faith that helps to drive the possibility of sobriety forward? Or maybe you've got a crush. This could be the greatest love story ever told, or the worst rejection humanity has ever known. You're not going to know until you shoot your shot. That is a leap of faith. The laws of the universe, the historical record, that's all belief. Grounded in observation, sure, and therefore carrying some weights for the rationalist, but it is still belief. It's not as though these things are unchallenged. There is always some measurement, some observation, some anomaly in the data, whether cosmic or geologic or anthropologic, that forces us to redo the math or reset timelines. This is not a static bunch of information that the empiricist is working with. It's dynamic. And you have to appreciate that whatever you assess to be the case at the moment is belief. You are an acolyte to an ever-evolving data set, which by its nature will bring more questions than answers. And that is the nature of inquiry. Whether in God or science or both, there's no getting away from it. And that's what brings us to our final point, the centrality of belief in the human experience. See, because we aren't around for very long. We've got all kinds of sensory limitations. Our consciousness is bogged down by trauma and prejudice. We are incapable of anything even remotely approaching objectivity. So we've got to work with what we have right now. We're all forced at some point to pivot away from the certainty of reason into the mystery of belief. But this requires practice, because we're not out here just trying to believe in everything. Nobody here is advocating for gullibility. Just as we condition our bodies through exercise or sharpen our intellect through education, so too we must refine this faculty of belief into something that is functional and balanced. And there's lots of ways to do that. Take some risks. Get outside, do something scary. Rock climbing for me, that is a huge exercise in trust. Or just get the imagination going. Read lots of fiction. I'm a huge proponent of role-playing games, for example. Anything to stimulate that part of ourselves which is not entirely rational. Because that's where most of the human experience actually lies. And maybe through these faith-building exercises, we can start to appreciate the value of an operationalized spirituality, which is something that we'll talk about in another video. So between now and then, keep the faith, because you're a believer, whether you like it or not.